So, Kunal, uh, Sri Kunal Sharkar, we are deliberately um, avoiding describing him as a doctor today because this is a panel discussion on Gandhi. Gandhi had a profound suspicion of modern medical methods, so we will take that away from the equation. But I mean, this is just an open-ended question. I don't know how to put this question, but as a as one of our foremost debaters, you are adept at speaking both for and against any motion, as all good debaters must. And Gandhi has his fair share of admirers and detractors and all that. And obviously, the one of the keywords that stands out is Satyagraha, his allegiance to truth, and essentially, which is related to the ethics of his politics, the moral compass that he was driven by. And so I am personally very interested in asking a rationalist like Kunal to give us his frank opinion about how, what does that mean, or does it have any legacy in this world of the post-truth?
Hello. Thank you, Joyanto. It's always hazardous to speak about history sat beside a historian of a claim, and that is why we've kept a seat empty in between, right? Should, that's your choice, yes. Ratnottama, thanks again. I think in what has been very wonderfully spoken so far, two B words have come out. And one B word is that of a brand, which Joyanto has mentioned. The other great B word was mentioned by Ratnottama, and that was Bodhisattva, Buddha. So, to the best of my own uneducated historical perspective, perhaps the two most famous world philosophers in 5,000 years of history of human civilization, the most successful philosophers with most defeated philosophies was Buddha and Gandhi. Nobody remembers the original form of Buddhism. It has undergone that many metamorphoses, that many recoloring, that many repackaging, that many divisions, that even though the original stream of thought can be seldom identified, Buddha sells t-shirts, he sells books, he sells literature, and like Gandhi, he's also found his own way into the currency notes of three countries, if I'm not mistaken. Gandhi only figures in currency notes of one country so far. Now, this gentleman's journey, when he lands up in this country in 1915, if the data serves me right, he brings with him his sort of precedence of what he did in South Africa. And South Africa will be very relevant to Gandhi because I'll speak a little bit about Mandela and Gandhi a little later. So when he comes in 1915, obviously Gandhi has a chromosomal distaste for violence, right? So by 1915, some of the vitriolic expressions of India's urge for independence post-1857 is manifesting in its violent forms. We've had a lot of hot-headed expressions of the violent urge to gain independence soon. And in this pretext, Gandhi lands in India. And I think probably what Gandhi saw was he saw two things. He saw these sporadic outbursts of violence, and he saw in the Indian National Congress, I'm not probably flattering myself, but Indian National Congress was at that time, I think, a little upscaled version of Calcutta Debating Circle, right? It was a kind of homely gathering, of elderly retired people, politicians, the Humes and the Besants and the Banerjees and people like that, who would have a very, very friendly conversation. It's not a bad idea to get independence, so on and so forth. And most of them had in the back of the mind that, look, this thing was probably not happening in the good part of the next 2 centuries, because Hitler hadn't expressed himself in 1915 yet. That man was still cooking as far as world history is concerned. So in that context, Gandhi lands his antibiotic into the Indian phenomenon in the form of satyagraha, and in the form of satyagraha, and that is in the background of the expression of some of the literature, some of the actions of the violent, acerbic, vitriolic freedom expression which is already happening. Now, a few things made the preeminence of non-violence possible. Those of you who follow book reviews, there's a very interesting book being reviewed now, which is Sampat's book on V. Savarkar. And if you happen to visit the Central Hall of Parliament, I don't know, a very intelligent person has put up the pictures in the Central Hall of Indian Parliament now, because if you look at Gandhi, your back will be at Savarkar. If you look at Savarkar, your back will be at Gandhi, right? And nobody is disturbing this sequence of pictures in Indian Parliament at this point of time. So by 1915, Savarkar has already spoken. The Dhingra incident has already happened. Savarkar has already, the British government is already chasing him around the world and so on and so forth. But what adds to his advantage is, by the time Gandhi's voice is heard, his philosophy is heard, Savarkar is locked up in cellular jail. So the constructive, you see, the proactive, the pro-violence people, the right wing of Indian freedom movement at that stage, they were not very articulate and they were very sporadic. So Gandhi seizes this opportunity. He has a germane distaste for violence. He looks at all this. He said, I'm not having any of this. He makes his own cocktail, because I believe the name was coined by one of his nephews, Satyagraha. So it is not just in Bengal you have a famous nephew. So even Gandhi had a famous nephew at his time. So he borrowed the word from the lexicon of his nephew. And it was probably called Sadagraha first, then it becomes Satyagraha, so on and so forth. Yes, and Gandhi applies it. Probably the major characteristics of this movement was non-violence. The major characteristic was truth as he identified. And obviously it was his belief that what I do cannot be at the physical cost or a harm to anybody else. And I will try to kind of proselytize or convert you to my point of view through my suffering. And hence, at some time, through my tenacity, through my persistence, we will meet. And this agreement will give rise to agreement. So this was the trait in which we have I think Champaran was the first expression of it in 1970. Champaran as in indigo, indigo comes into the scenario, and then every 1 or 2 years you have things like this. Now by the 1920s, whilst the First World War has just ended, you see, honestly speaking, I cannot talk, because the more I talk about history, the more my ignorance will manifest. So the Indians can only talk consistently about movies or cricket. So we will now get into the cricketing analogy, because in the 1920s, the freedom struggle is in the test cricket mode. Slow, 5, limited over. Because you see, who was the world changer? The world changer was this man born in this nondescript Austrian village called Adolf Hitler. He's not expressed himself yet. So world is going on its own speed. The World War has ended. The Western European powers have carved out the caliphate into 22 states. So everybody is very happy. Stomach is full. Lot of territory is gained. So there is really no timeline on the agenda that when freedom is going to come. So I think India and its kind of privileged aristocracy has a fleeting thought about independence in that era and kind of encourages Gandhi to ramble on. It's like a test match cricket which is going on. And this test match cricket goes on. It's a tenacious, rambling, ethical, truthful version of the freedom struggle. It goes through like a life history of a butterfly. It goes through the larval stage, the pupal stage, many other stages. You have non-violence, you have the Salt March, you have Swadeshi. It comes in various other colors and flavors at different times. But one thing that Gandhi achieves in this time, though the process was slow, though the lines in sand has not been drawn yet, the biggest achievement is from being a coffee table movement, he makes this a population agenda. And this is in an era where Zuckerberg is not yet born. You don't have a cell phone yet. You don't have Facebook. You don't have WhatsApp. You don't even have Arnab Goswami. So in that era, can you imagine, within a period of probably less than 10 years, this man traveling on foot, largely underclothed, largely underprovided for, transforms a very comfortable, cushy evening club dialogue into a population vision for Indian independence, without any electrical, electronic, social media assistance at all. And I think probably the only other person to have achieved this kind of popularity without the help of Mark Zuckerberg has been Jesus Christ, historically. Because no other person with this span of time has spread. Because you mentioned the bubonic plague. I think Gandhi's popularity at that stage spread even faster than the bubonic plague. So he was beating the bacteria at its game. He did it. He made the aspiration for freedom. We are very mistaken in there is no evidence in history that the Indian population by and large was really yearning for freedom or rolling in dust wanting to get free tomorrow morning. Indians by and large, after 900 years of Islamic rule and the other 200 plus of British rule, had by the time more or less forgotten what it was like to be free. It was a very foreign concept to us. It is almost like Bengalis wanting to be economically prosperous. We have forgotten about it. We don't even think about it. If a Bengali ever wants to see a aspiring Bengali, you think the fellow is raving mad, send him to an asylum somewhere. So that was, I think, the first achievement of Gandhi's philosophy, was giving a population valid base to this philosophy. But then comes the hard part. And then the hard part is that the nearer we get to the Second World War and the nearer we get to 1945, which is the end of the Second World War, when it is actually becoming manifest that the British are not just rambling along with us, but they are drawing the lines in sand, the timetable is actually being drawn, that they are going to actually vacate this colony of theirs. The nearer we get to 1945, the further we get away from Satyagraha. So this is something an educated a theoretical historians will not tell you. You need a rustic, uneducated, crass character like myself to tell you that the nearer we got to freedom, the further we got from Gandhi. But still, there were two debates, which I think you mentioned debates over here, which is extremely important in this era, very constructive. And these two debates, unfortunately, has got buried under the heaps and volumes of totally redundant hagiographic literature. And one school of debate which Indians would benefit from is the Gandhi-Ambedkar debates that went on for a decade between the 30s and 40s. The debate between political democracy and social democracy. Ambedkar in his lifetime never addressed Gandhi as a Mahatma, always said Mr. Gandhi, and he always addressed him as Mr. Ambedkar. That's a different story. You have a different panel discussion someday, we will discuss it. The Ambedkar-Gandhi debates. And we beg to disappoint you. The nearer you come to Swadeshi, the further Rabindranath diverges away from Gandhi. Because that man who went through his cycles of disillusionment, by that time, the nearer you got to getting away from imported products and burning clothes and things like that, you come up with Charodhai. You come up with Ghore Baire. And Rabindranath, in one of his last meetings with Gandhi, tells him two things. One thing he told him on his face, that you are economically mistaken. You cannot spurn the emotional volatility of Swadeshi by kicking these poor peasants and farmers in their stomach. Because that was one of the reasons, the real-time reason why the poor Muslim peasants, the poor Muslim weavers, the poor Muslim sellers of the little shops in the district towns and villages drifted away from the Indian partition, Indian freedom movement. And the second thing that Rabindranath reminds Gandhi about is that, look, you may want to do so, but you do not enjoy the empathy of the minority community, because that is where the last probable recorded Indian leader who managed to do a balancing act between the Hindus and Muslims successfully was perhaps Subhash Bose, preceded by C.R. Das. No third leader has done it as skillfully as two of them. So in other words, the nearer, Satyagraha was a wonderful, wonderful concept. It had all the correct ingredients in it. But when the heat was mounting, the nearer we got to the timeline of freedom, the moment you had the power struggle in sight, the religious divide, the religious question became a very important question. The great man, unfortunately, was accused for tinkering and tickling religiosity because of the Khilafat movement. Khilafat is a very ill-understood movement in the timeline of Indian politics, because why on earth would Indians come around to cry yourself hoarse for an Ottoman Empire getting dismembered is not very well understood. And some of these important questions in this era was that by the time we get to the late 30s and early 40s, does the process justify the objectives? The means and the end problem was a one dichotomy, was one question of contradiction that the Satyagraha philosophy faces at this point. Another question it faced, crucial question that it begs to be asked at this point was the philosophy right for the politics of that era? Were we trying to sell expired medicine, a wrong medicine for the wrong disease? We were not sure. Because the romance of 1920s was dead by 1926, when it was more than apparent that with the formation of the Muslim League, that Hindu-Muslim unity was really a dream that will not be fulfilled. So in this churning, we attained freedom, obviously, in 1947. And it is I think, as Indians, as a post-independent citizens, it makes us really, fills us with a sense of defeat. That, look, independence came at a loss of 1 million lives. Where was nonviolence from 1946? Where was nonviolence in the riots of Punjab? Where was the nonviolence in the bloodletting of Bengal? Where was the nonviolence in the rampages of Bihar? Where? Please. You will get your time to ask a question. So, it is sad that what was perhaps an unique philosophical medallion that we were wearing from 1915 to 1917, come the actual time of this nation getting independent, it almost looks that all the major tenets have been violated. The clause of non-violence have not been fulfilled. The clause of unity has not been fulfilled. And remember that for all practical purposes, Gandhi, since 1946, perhaps about a year before we became independent, was as far from the power center of Indian National Congress as he could really be. Sitting in Delhi, this great man, with a sense of dejection, makes the statement that all my yes men are all my no men today. Gautamda is not here, but as somebody who is creative, Ratnottama can tell us that how would, as Indians, how would we have written in life, his life story, that if this great soul, instead of getting assassinated, had lived on for another 5 years in oblivion and simply died of old age, almost half forgotten by an ungrateful country. Because we had almost treated him as a disposable product of philosophy. The principles of Gandhi were already discarded at the time of 1948. He toured Punjab, he toured Kashmir, he toured Bengal, he was in Shodhpur, he was in Noakhali, he was everywhere. And his description of himself at that stage was, I am a poor man going round from door to door with a bowl in hand. There were no epithets of father of the nation and all this kind of, flowery sentiments at that stage. So I think, as a post-independent creature, it really makes me wonder. Can you imagine, as a screenplay writer, can you imagine the scenario? Another 5-7 years of this great man's life, when he's disowned by the Congress, when probably Nehru thinks that he's also made him a Margdarshak by this time. He's nowhere near the power center of Indian politics. Then how would India have remembered that Gandhi if he would have survived till the age of 85 and not been claimed by a cruel bullet at the age of 78? So Satyagraha is definitely a branded philosophy. Satyagraha runs the risk of being called utopian. Satyagraha, being beautiful as it is, runs the risk of being called that a great idea which stuttered and failed and could not find its ultimate culmination when the objective was attained. We did become independent. Objective was attained. But the nearer we went to the objective, the further we seem to divert away from this philosophy. Could it have been avoided? I know not. Just two questions. I come up with two observations about Gandhi and the world. Is, say, South Africa. South Africa is a very contradictory phase in Gandhi's life because there is not much evidence that Gandhi in South Africa did not really struggle for the emancipation of black rights. He did not do that. Gandhi in South Africa actually fought for the right of the Indian traders, right? And later on, when Gandhi was re-evaluated, you have theses coming out from Johannesburg, etc., where Gandhi's attitudes towards the labeled black population stands to be questioned. But South Africa learned a lesson. What Jallianwala Bagh was to India, Sharpsville was to the South African freedom movement. Sharpsville, I think, happened in 1964. But you see the difference between the Gandhian thought and the African National Congress thought. because even they had their mad people like Megasutu Buthelezi, the Zuma and things like that. Then they had the great people like Katara, who was giving company to Nelson Mandela. But after Jallianwala Bagh, Gandhi did not disown his non-violence. Rather, he had a lot of difference, even with people like Rabindranath, etc. But he stuck to his principal vision. But what African National Congress does after 1964 is they say, Tata, goodbye. Nelson Mandela said it. After Sharpsville, he said, end of non-violence, and they change gear completely, and from non-violence, African National Congress has an organization called Shields and Spears for Africans or something like that, and the African freedom movement takes a completely different complexion post-Sharpsville, which our freedom movement did not take, honestly, post-Jallianwala Bagh. And one lesson I tell you, that politically, leaders learned from Gandhi later on. There was no other leader post-Gandhi who could be displaced so easily from the driver's seat of a freedom movement. Nelson Mandela, through Winnie Mandela, you were discussing about Kasturba Gandhi. Read the works of Winnie Mandela, right? So as Nelson Mandela was in the Robben Island prison, Winnie Mandela was doing his work with him. And when at the age of 71 he comes out of Robben Island, yes, Mandela was inspired by Gandhi, but he took a lesson from Gandhi that even when he was out of prison, nobody could displace him. The driver's seat to navigate South Africa to the most sensible solution could have only happened through the hands of Mandela. And India was singularly unlucky that Gandhi was not in the driver's seat when we went through the bloodshed, the turmoil, the rape and plunder of 1945 to 1947. So our history did not give us the benefit that South Africa had through Mandela. India did not get that benefit, though Gandhi was alive and kicking at that time. Another leader next door to us did not commit the same mistake, and that leader was Mujibur Rahman. Yes. So my last point over is that Satyagraha, we are all in admiration of the concept, and my take of it was that we were deeply, deeply impressed by the concept, we adored it. The nearer we got to the freedom, the further we got away from the philosophy. And I hope that the actual loss of life, the utter acts of violence that resulted in Indian freedom, that we deserved a better outcome to this great philosophy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, please. Okay. Thank you so much, Kunal. I will quickly move on to our last panelist, Justice Chitatosh Mukherjee. And the question that I would like to ask him is that he has been one of, he has spent a lifetime in law. And I guess one of the great rewards of practicing the law is that sometimes you can become part of justice being done. And Gandhi himself was a trained constitutional lawyer. So was Ambedkar. But Gandhi made a career out of knowing and crossing the limits of the limits of law as an expression of justice, so that civil disobedience became his moral duty when the law failed to protect the concept of justice adequately. So this, as a justice, as a legal practitioner, I would like to ask Justice Mukherjee about his thoughts. My first quick question is his thoughts about law and its limits, and whether there is a duty of civil disobedience wherever necessary, defying the law, still exists in today's world. And then, if we have time, then we will have a quick question on the horizon question.
There's a question which rather difficult to answer. The law, after all, you need all the time. But then, when a country is striving for independence, law has to be broken. For that matter, the independence movement was led by men who most of them belonged to the legal profession. Therefore, one could, to quote, a recent speech by a very eminent person, the person has various identities. The one, not that one identity one has, one apparition or in one form, he is a lawyer pleading for his client in a court of law. In another way, he commits a breach of law, seeks independence. Therefore, it's possible for man to have not only a duality, person to have more than one, views about it. So therefore, I suppose, in the matter of things, when the emerging society of our country, call it resurrection, call it by any name, the lawyers led. Maybe some of you may regret doing it. But then point is that the lawyers, at the beginning, many of the eminent men of this country had gone to the court of law, but they did not, laid away their conscience. Therefore, I find nothing wrong in doing it. So far as Gandhi is concerned, his appearance in court to say very, model, both including one in the Chief Presidency Magistrates Court in Calcutta or elsewhere. He did appear and he did submit to law. But his conversations with the magistrates, Champaran Sattargaon has been said with regard to the district magistrate, the talks he had, the peaceful way in which he led the movement at the end of it, and resulting in the victory for the patient in Bihar. These are model things. But I suppose that Mahatma Gandhi had ceased to be a lawyer in this sense we are by the time he was leading the independence movement. I was thinking for more other question which arises. Did Mahatma Gandhi succeed in the matter of amelioration, in the matter of persons who were called, now called, they are now called, they used to be called untouchables. He named them as Harijan. Did he change only their names, or did he succeed in giving a better deal for them? Did it really have resulted in taking them out of a life unbearable, a life who were untouchables? The Constitution itself has now made in the Part-3 of the Constitution untouchability abolished. We have passed law by which the untouchability is a crime. I'll throw it to the House to discuss whether there is merely a name change or there has been really a change of heart so far as the upper caste is concerned. On that point, I'd rather say, I'm leaving aside the other question which Mr. Shengupta has raised. There has been. That's the question, I believe, when it was put to me, the letter, that was asked about it, the result of that. So always the lawyers change their brief, therefore, good. I prefer to say I'll give a think about the lawyer's point, which will give me an occasion, another occasion. we'll do speak about it. Now about the change in the not is it a change of nomenclature or is it a change of heart in the people? With regard to that, I mean, one could must remember that Mahatma Gandhi was still believed in religion. He did not discard the concept of Varna. Himself belonged to a community called Banyas, who was not one of three upper classes in the society. Then even then, I mean, what he did was to make the persons who are called untouchables. Harijans mean the God's men. They meant of the. Did he do so? I mean, there has been certainly a slur. Is a shame for the country where people, I mean, permanently, I mean, branded as untouchables, as persons whose one would not touch their food, even touch their bodies. It has still continued. The question is, did he succeed in having that done? On that question, I was thinking that Mahatma Gandhi himself had to deal with this question very directly, by in the not even at the time the constitution was made, much earlier. In the 1930s, the question, the nomenclature of the persons who are the lower rung of the society were concerned, they were made into scheduled castes. If you go back to history, Dr. Sengupta will be able to say much better about it. Ramsay MacDonald, the Prime Minister of England at that time, made an award by which there was a separate electorate, voting rights, separate constituencies for the scheduled caste, as they were called, those untouchables. The persons who came to be named as Harijan by Mahatma Gandhi, he named his people Harijan also. Now, that was done. Gandhi went into fast at Pune. And one of the critics of Mahatma Gandhi was Ambedkar. In Pune, there's a pact signed by which it was agreed that while there will be reservation of seats in the legislature for the scheduled caste, but they will be in the same voting, in the same constituency. There became reservation of seats which have been in vogue even now in the municipal elections you find in the local body elections. So that persisted. Therefore, in a way, Mahatma Gandhi did, concede, if I could use that expression, to a separate existence of the scheduled caste as a voting body. I mean, that led to a lot of problems. And talking about the Hindu-Muslim unity, the Muslim League's existence was much earlier than the 1940s when the declaration of Pakistan was made at Lahore. But that was in 1906 onwards, because a group of Muslim noblemen mostly went to Simla, led by Prince Aga Khan, to demand a separate electorate, recognition of their right before Lord Minto. The result was that's where, the assertion of a subnationality for the Muslim commenced and is proliferated. I will not go into that. And at the point at that time, one could be a member both of a Muslim League and the Indian National Congress as it is. After Khilafat, which of all persons, Jinnah had opposed, and left the shores of this country, that's where the division or hiatus between the Muslim League was complete after that, and ultimately it led to the demand for Pakistan, as I said, in 1940, moved by Fazlul Haq, who happened to be the Premier of Bengal at that time. But as I've said, that had happened. And I'm reminded, if you permit me to say my personal recollections, 1947, 14th of August midnight, I happened to sit in a visitors' gallery in Lok Sabha, as it is came to be called, the Constituent Assembly. When that memorable speech was delivered by Pandit Nehru, that midnight speech, as it's called, with India awakes to freedom. He did remember. He mentioned Mahatma Gandhi's name in his speech. He was followed by Dr. Radhakrishnan. But then Mahatma Gandhi was nowhere there. He was in the Haidari Manzil in Beliagata trying to quell the riot which had broken out since 14th of August at Calcutta 1946. Therefore, but then I would say that not that Mahatma Gandhi in the matter of independence totally disagreed with the partition, which unfortunately resulted in so much misery and death. Because on the 3rd of June declaration of 1946, Mahatma Gandhi did not oppose the Congress. Therefore, I mean, in a way, I mean, there are failings, not that. I mean, he was a great man, but then on occasions, I mean, he did lead maybe as a looming visionary. He did, without claiming that I'm not even a foreigner member of the Congress, he did direct Congress. And about the violence, I have just mentioning a book which his grandson, Gopal Krishna Gandhi, had written, Gandhiji for violence and Gandhiji against violence. He did mention, when in occasions, as one of my earlier speakers said, that Gandhi did use physical force, not many times. But as I've said, that's bound to be happen in a man who is, after all, not a deity. But as I've said, I mean, the question is, in our constitution, therefore, while the equality has been achieved by providing the constitution, but have we really achieved it? I'm reminded of the speech of Dr. Ambedkar after the constitution had been adopted. Dr. Rajendra Prasad spoke after the constitution had been adopted. Then when it came turn of Dr. Ambedkar to say about the achievement of having a constitution, after all, where fundamental rights are guaranteed, he had mentioned that he gave a warning at that time. He said, when you speak of equality, what this constitution has done is to have the equality in matter of political rights. But without equality, social and economic, it would be a frail object. Therefore, he said it is necessary to have inequality not merely of political rights, but also of economic and social rights. Therefore, I believe that is yet to be achieved. I mean, so therefore, the task of Mahatma Gandhi remains unfinished. I don't wish to be much longer. Therefore, I mean, this has happened, and after all, one could, like any other high ideal, you cannot, in full measure, you can achieve this. But that doesn't mean that we fail to strive for it and seek the just rights, as in the matter of violence, or in the matter, for that matter, of equality, or the high vaulting rights. But we must try, and I hope in a discussion like this, we make a heart searching to find out how we do it. Thank you very much.
We had a fascinating panel discussion so far. We had 5 different speakers, 5 perspectives, and I'm sure you have many questions. We have some time for questions. I will make some requests at the outset. Please identify yourself when making a question. Please identify the panelist to which you are directing your question, and please keep your questions short and pointed. Please. Okay. So, you have the first question? Yes, please. Yeah, there's a cordless mic going around. Yes.
Good evening, sir. I'm Rekha Modi, founder of Istri Shakti, the Parallel Force. My first observation is to Madam. She spoke of Ba Kasturba Gandhi, very good. But just to remind you, we are in Bengal, and Gandhi referred to Sarla Devi Chaudhrani as his spiritual wife. I think this is something we need to think about. Second to you, sir, you talked about international arena, Gandhi getting away from everything. I think we need to look at 1948, when Israel got the freedom. And also, when Gandhi wrote about Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, where is my golden son? Thank you very much.
You see, response regarding Israel.
Hello.
The Israel question is, I think you need to revisit the Palestine and the Israel history part, where both the stance of Gandhi and India were periodically changing, right? And the change was of two reasons. One was the historical biblical context, and the secondly was our kind of cultural inclination to support the Palestinian cause. So which cause were you actually supporting? So time and again we seem to vacillate in that kind of thing, and Gandhi was also no exception from that. And regarding your question of 1948 and Subhas Bose, look, even I was just telling John, though, if you listen to, I wasn't here in person, but I listened to Shugatoda's wonderful 1 hour lecture, I think a couple of weeks ago. The pathos or the pain of that is, I'm sure Gandhi was very loving, very affectionate, very sincere, but somehow his respect for Subhash only grew when Subhash was away. If he had valued Subhash Bose when the man was within an arm's length, then probably you would have got far more intellectual and political equity out of him. So all the conversations and affections he showered on Subhash in his absence makes great sentiment but poor history.
Can I take this question? Yeah, there is not much to answer. I can only tell you this. I don't want to dwell on this because my own understanding of the way Gandhi treated women or his wife vis-a-vis other women, I have not been able to reconcile to that. But this is not a thing I would like to elaborate today.
My name is Priyadarshi. Now, before I start on Satyagraha, Satyagraha was not a Gandhian invention. The first successful Satyagraha was conducted by Yashodhara and Buddha's mother, Jogomaya Devi. And they and the palace women, they came and conducted Satyagraha at Buddha's place. Buddha was not interested in giving Diksha to women, but they insisted that they would have the Diksha. Buddha said, my movement will lose 1,000 years if I give Diksha to women. But they insisted, and finally Buddha had to give way. And so Satyagraha was instantly started by women and women of the palace, Buddha's palace, his mother and his wife. Now the questions I have a couple of questions, First thing, one of the panelists said
Please keep them brief.
Yeah, sure. Just 2 points. First thing, one of the panelists said that Gandhi was a bodhisattva. But first of all, my question was Gandhi and the confusion about political and spiritual movement. As far as my knowledge goes, Gandhi never led a spiritual movement. Spirituality is entirely a different cup of tea, entirely a different ball game. Spirituality means 3 things, as Acharya Shankaracharya said. First, human birth. Second, the desire for liberation, mumukshetra. And third, the counseling of a realized guru. But Gandhi, throughout his life, never had any desire for liberation. Neither did he go and take a refuge of a spiritual guru. So spirituality, I think people are confusing moral idealism with spirituality. Spirituality is entirely different. And bodhisattva means a one who's totally free from the cycle of birth and death, and is completely free from suffering. But history says Gandhi was suffering intensely. He was extremely, during the hour of independence, he was intensely in agony. So rather, Gandhi needed Buddha at that time. At that time, what Gandhi needed at that hour was Buddha himself. I mean, that's the point.
I think we have your question. Yes.
Yeah, and another question I have. Yeah. First,
I think what Ratnottama really, she'll answer for herself. What she referred to was she was just making an analogy about the stature of personalities, really. And your points regarding definition of bodhisattva, etc. is well taken.
Yes, I did not say Gandhi was bodhisattva. I said he has been described as a bodhisattva. But apart from what you have said, you've said. So you have not asked a question. You've answered what you have wanted to say. I have only one thing, a rejoinder, so to say, to your question, if it is. Sorry. It is that spirituality cannot be defined in these 3 points. Spirituality is every step, every morning till night, the way you live. It can be political, it can be moral, it can be social. You can describe it in any way. Spirituality, my limited understanding, is not a doctrine, not a, a philosophy put between covers. It is an experience. And Gandhi lived by what he believed. And the whole question, and that is why the most important thing that I would take away from his life is to stand firm on your conviction. If you think it is your right, stand up for it, even if it means suffering. And if you think you are breaking someone else's right, beware. Thank you.
I have another question for Justice Mukherjee.
I think there are other questions, but this conversation can just trail off over tea outside, please. Yeah.
I am Biprangshu. So I just want to know one thing that we say that Mahatma Gandhi went to Noakhali, in different places to stop the riot. So I would like to ask a question to the historian, particularly I think Mrs. Agnihotri. The historian.
I'm just a panelist. I'm just a moderator here.
Just whatever may be. So it's a purely historical fact. So the riot started, the 1946 riot, it was started, I just want to know simply, also from the historians, that it started in when, at which point of time the riot finally took its practical shape of violence and, in a vigorous way, it started and, just throughout India. Was it that when Gandhi also nodded or agreed to accept the independence at the cost of partition, which was the proposal of other leaders of that time, that if we don't accept the partition, we may not achieve it for another 100 years. So, was it?
Your question is...
And in which point it started, this riot?
The riot started, first the riot broke out in Punjab, then at Noakhali, that was the direct action day in 46, August. Thereafter, it was really an aftermath of that was a riot at Noakhali. There were stories of, deaths, conversion, looting, and then that was followed by a riot at Bihar. Mahatma Gandhi had gone after the riot in Noakhali, where a state of terror prevailed. The people were out of their home. That's when he had gone. And in fact, even now in Noakhali, Gandhi Ashram still continues to exist.
Whether this riot had been started only after the people were confirmed that India is getting divided.
You see, the question...
Two countries have been
I think
formed, Pakistan and India.
It is perhaps difficult to put a specific time and date to it, but probably the biggest sort of disappointment, there was lot of disquiet smoldering for a long time, but I think the peak was, as Sir has pointed out, the direct action day, and prior to that was Jawaharlal Nehru's comment when he kind of politically rejected the cabinet mission plan. Because at the end of the formal meeting of the cabinet mission plan, I think that was May of 1946. I think in the May of 1946, when cabinet mission plan has the three-tier federal structure for an undivided India, yes, there was some kind of hope that there will be a freedom in the three groups. I think you had Group A, Group B, Group C. You had the states clustered into the three states. A three-tiered federal structure. It was probably a little bit of an uncouth system, but there was some hope that we can walk off the table with a feeling of us being one country and not partition.
Correct.
The end of the meeting, there was some kind of agreement. Then Maulana Abul Kalam Azad gets succeeded by Jawaharlal Nehru as the Congress president. So when Maulana Abul Kalam steps away and Nehru comes in, Nehru on the, I think it was 3rd of July or somewhere like that, 3rd June probably, he makes the comment that the grouping is unsustainable. This is the words he used, that the groupings are unsustainable. Rumor has it that by that time Nehru is probably suspicious that Jinnah is on the way to become the first Prime Minister of undivided India.
Correct.
And that those were the overcurrents and the undercurrents. And that was the time when the fuse was lit, direct action day, and hell broke loose. And with Noakhali, you see, apart from the Hindu-Muslim context, there were others. In Shugatoda said in his own lecture as well, you had the commercial reason, the money lender and the oppressed people, etc., etc. There were other angles in Noakhali as well. Because you see, riot has two elements. Riot has a religious element. Riot has a loot and plundered element.
Opportunism element.
Opportunism element.
Yes, simply.
Is there anywhere in the world? So I think that direct action day probably
That is
the
only
day, is the
reason,
day,
main reason.
is the main reason. It is
behind
the day
the-
of discord.
Sure.
ignition.
Other questions from the floor, please?
স্যার আপনি যে গান্ধীকে আপনি একটা ফেলিওর আপনি প্রুভ করলেন এবং সত্যাগ্রহকে জাস্ট একটা ব্র্যান্ডিং আপনি করলেন, আমার এটা আপনার কাছে প্রশ্ন আছে যে গান্ধীকে আপনি যে ফেলিওর কিভাবে করে ভাবেন? একটা দেশ যেটা 300 বছরের মানে যেটাকে বলে ফরেন রুল, হ্যাঁ, তাদের আন্ডারে ছিল এবং ছোট ছোট ছেলেমেয়েরা, বাচ্চা বাচ্চা ছেলেমেয়েরা, তারা এই হিংসার পথ ধরে যখন ফাঁসিতে উঠছিল, সেই টাইমে গান্ধী যদি বলেন যে সত্যাগ্রহ করে আমরা কিন্তু ওদেরকে আমাদের দেশ থেকে তাড়াবো এবং ওই দেশটাকে আমরা সেইভাবে করে তৈরি করব যেমন আমাদের নিজের ইচ্ছে আছে, সেই জিনিসটাকে আপনি কি করে আপনি কোয়েশ্চেন করতে পারেন? আমি একটা জিনিস আপনাকে বলি, কোনো দেশ যেখানে একটা এত মানে যেটাকে বলে রিচ ল্যান্ড আছে আর একদম যেটাকে বলে বন্ধুয়া মজদুরের মতন চাকর আছে, ওই জায়গাটাকে কেউ ছেড়ে যেতে পারে না, কেউ ছেড়ে যেতে চাইবে না, ওকে? এবং সেই কথাটা আমি এই কারণে বলছি যে আমি কিন্তু নিজে আমি ভালো করে জানি যে পলিটিক্সটা কী জিনিস হয় এবং মানুষের মনে যেটাকে পয়জন ঘুলে দেওয়া সেইটা আমাদের দেশের লোকজনও ভালো করে জানে এবং ফরেনের লোকজনও ভালো করে জানে।
প্যানেল ডিসকাশন নিয়ে কোশ্চেনটা করুন। আপনার কোশ্চেন হচ্ছে
আমি সত্যাগ্রহকে আপনি ব্র্যান্ডিং করছেন এবং গান্ধীকে আপনি একটা ফেলিয়ার বলছেন, সেটা আমি কোনো মতেই আমি কিন্তু বুঝি না আপনি কিভাবে করে বলছেন।
আপনার হয়তো
আপনার নিজস্ব মত, কোনো আপত্তি নেই তাতে।
আপনি নিজস্ব মতটা দিয়েছেন, সেই জন্য আমিও নিজস্ব মতটা দিতে চাইছি। আপনি শুনুন, আপনি আপনি যে মানে নেলসন ম্যান্ডেলার যে কথাটা আপনি বলছেন, আমি একটা কথা, আমি একজন নন বেঙ্গলি, আমি একজন বিহারি মানুষ, আমি এখানে ছোটবেলা থেকে মানুষ হয়েছি। আমি ছোটবেলায় একটা গান শুনেছিলাম যেটা হচ্ছে কৃষ্ণ কায়া আফ্রিকা মোর কৃষ্ণকলি মা। এই গানটা আমি যখন শুনেছিলাম, আমি এইটাই আমি জানি যে ব্ল্যাকরা একটু বেশি ব্ল্যাক হয় আর আমরা একটু কম ব্ল্যাক আছি, জাস্ট এইটুকুই হচ্ছে আমাদের ডিফারেন্সটা, কিন্তু হোয়াইট আর ব্ল্যাকের মধ্যে ডিফারেন্সটা অনেক বেশি আছে। সেই জন্য সেই জিনিসগুলোকে নিয়ে আপনি গান্ধীকে কোনোদিনও ফেলিয়ার করে বলতে পারবেন না। থ্যাংক ইউ।
আসলে একটা কথা আছে ইংরেজিতে, খুব বিখ্যাত কথা, যে আপনি যেটা বলছেন তার এক বর্ণ আমি বিশ্বাস করি না, কিন্তু আপনি যেটা বলছেন আপনার সেই কথাটা বলার অধিকারটা রক্ষা করার জন্য আমি আমার জীবন দিতে পারি। আমার মনে হয় আমাদের বক্তব্য সেটাই হবে।
না শুনুন না, আপনি ম্যাডাম আপনি যা যা বললেন, তো আমরা মনে করি যে বাস্তব যদি সত্যি তাই হতো, আমরা বোধহয় সবাই আরও অনেক অনেক বেশি সুখী হতাম, আরও অনেক বেশি খুশি হতাম। হ্যাঁ, এবং একটা মানুষ তার যে দুঃখ, তার যে বেদনা, তার যে গ্লানি নিয়ে সে তার 78 বছরের জীবন, 76 থেকে 78 বছর গান্ধীর যে নিজের উপর ডিসঅ্যাপয়েন্টমেন্ট নয়, উনি যখন দেখেছিলেন যে যখন আমাদের মধ্যে যতক্ষণ গান্ধী তার সংগ্রাম করে গেছেন স্বাধীনতার জন্যে, ব্রিটিশ ভারতবর্ষ ছেড়ে যাবে, তখন পথটা তার সামনে একটা মাত্র লক্ষ্য ছিল। আর যখন আমরা নিজেদের মধ্যে নানান রকম ভাগ বিভাগ জটলা করলাম, এর মধ্যে ধর্ম চলে এলো, এর মধ্যে হিন্দু মুসলিম চলে এলো, এখানে কাস্ট সিস্টেম চলে এলো, তখন এই যে আমি খুব একটা দেখি না, এটা আমাদের এই সিরিয়ালের চিত্রনাট্যর মতো তখন গল্পটা অনেক বেশি জটিল হয়ে গেল। এবং এই অসুখটার জন্যে তখন আর একটা পেনিসিলিন ট্যাবলেট জল দিয়ে খেয়ে এই ওষুধটাকে সারানো যেত না। এবং তখন আমরাই, এটা তো ব্রিটিশদের দোষ নয়, আমরাই আমাদের জীবন, আমরাই আমাদের পরিপ্রেক্ষিতটাকে এত জটিল করে ফেললাম যে গান্ধীর পক্ষেও তার সেই সত্যাগ্রহের রাস্তায়, নন ভায়োলেন্টের রাস্তায় থেকে আমরা আলটিমেটলি স্বাধীন হব, ব্রিটিশ দেশ ছেড়ে চলে যাবে। নিশ্চয়ই আমি আপনার মতো বিশ্বাস করি যে এই রূপকথা যদি সত্যি সত্যি হতো, আজকে স্বাধীনতা উত্তর প্রজন্ম হিসেবে আমরা সত্যি নিজেরা অনেক সুখী হতাম। আপনি তো বিহারের লোক, আমার বাবা 12 বছর বয়সে সে সূর্য সেনের মুভমেন্টের জন্য সাঁতার কেটে কেটে সে বন্দুক সাপ্লাই করেছে। কি কোর্ট থেকে এসছে? ও বাবা, এটা আপনি তো আপনি লাস্ট অ্যামেন্ডমেন্টটা পড়েননি কনস্টিটিউশনের? আপনি এসব কথাগুলো জোরে জোরে বলবেন না, আপনাকে জেলে পাঠাতে পারে। লাস্ট
No, I think, in some way her feeling has been heard. The basic thing is this. Basic thing is that, no, please try to understand, this satyagraha was a principle which could not have been practiced in a vacuum. And the milieu of politics was such that Gandhi was never keen about any control of, kind of seat. He never wanted to be the main driving person of the country. So as a result, the other players, it took the entire plot in a different direction. But there is probably nothing wrong with satyagraha. It might have got far away from when we achieved our freedom. But as a principle, as a value, I think it is something which is valid in a certain sense, in a certain, I would say, when politically it is not so complex. As a personal value, it still remains.
There is one word only. I was delighted to hear Dr. Sarkar's exposition of Satyagraha. But one thing, I would say that there was other part of the Congress movement, the extremist movement, which started much earlier than arrival of Gandhiji in Calcutta during the first partition of Bengal. Sri Aurobindo was leading for a short while, Sister Nivedita providing the inspiration for this. These are equally important for achieving our independence. These are things which we cannot ignore. Secondly, the sacrifices which the revolutionaries made, who fought very unequal battle with the governmental forces. They are to be honored. Think of all things, Bhagat Singh, even Chittagong, Armory Raid case or Chittagong revolt. These are also equally important for achieving. So it's a conjoint effect of non-violence, violence, and an urge in the people, their aspiration to achieve independence. That became fruition and not otherwise.
I was very... I'm inspired by what Dr. Sarkar has said. He said that as a screenwriter, just imagine Gandhi, if he had lived on 5 more years, what would he have thought? And immediately it crossed my mind that long years before Gandhi, there was a man called Krishna. I don't know what his surname was. Krishna also trod the same path. He did not lift a weapon. He did not lift a weapon, but he steered the entire Mahabharata. He actually egged on people to take up weapon for the cause of right. And he lived after Mahabharata, and he died a forgotten death, a forgotten man almost. Badhir Tire, a man who steered the entire Mahabharata, war of Mahabharata, he died by the arrow of one.
So I think we had a stimulating panel discussion. No, I don't have, I learned a lot from each of these panelists. Yes, but I agree with this point that it was not really because on the basis of modern research, on the basis of recent research, it is more or less accepted that the reason why the British left was not really Gandhi's non-violence, but because of two factors. One was the growing management crisis. India as an empire was becoming more and more ungovernable. And it brought much less profits than it did after the depression of the late 1920s. And secondly, there was also a specter of violence because all of these mass movements were growing increasingly violent. So in the aftermath of the war, when there were a great deal of uncertainty, the empire was in a thorough, it was a management disaster, and and the specter of violence was looming large, and the worst thing that the British feared was a repetition of something like the revolt of 1857. So that's why they eventually left, a combination of factors, in which Gandhi had contributed, of course, because the specter of violence was exacerbated by the fact that Gandhi had added the weight of sheer numbers to a movement of nationalism, which, as Dr. Sarkar said so aptly, was like some version, I think a more modest version of the Calcutta debating, a more soft-spoken version of the Calcutta debating circle. So that is the combination of factors. We all have our own theories of what ultimately mattered in the end of the partition. I think there is enough in history and there is enough in recent research to stick to all of our convictions, all our beliefs. But these kinds of sessions are meant to veer around to some discussion, some ideas, so that we can rethink some of our set ideas and convictions and reach a common ground. But on behalf of everybody, I convey my sincere thanks to all the panelists who are all so busy in their lives, but who have taken time off to come and enlighten us, enrich us, and give us ideas for thought. So thank you very much, and thank you all for coming and participating in the discussions. Thank you. And there is tea outside, and the conversation can continue over tea.